And it was not a nervous thing. It was just,
We're going live.
I didn't want to waste time.
I was like, I slept like a baby, didn't even care. I barely remembered the show.
It was not a nervous thing.
Well, after the couple of beers I'll have, I probably won't remember it either.
I was like, I slept like a baby, didn't even care. I barely remembered the show.
Okay, somebody's got their audio up, so just watch that so we don't get feedback. So we are live, guys. Hey, everybody. Sean Dodson here with The Flip Side. I want to welcome you to the non-PC beer drinking, thrill of the chase talking show. I want to say that it looks like Jimmy Fast was once again our front-running bastard in the chat room tonight. And as always, because it is the beer drinking show, tonight I'm drinking an elevated IPA from La Cumbra Brewery out of New Mexico. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this and say cheers to all of you guys in the chat room. And while I'm pouring this beer, I want to introduce a couple of new faces to some of you. You probably know who they are, but have never seen them on a live YouTube channel or anything. So I'll introduce Crysty and Iron Will. So Crysty, if you want, go ahead and introduce yourself to the chat room and everybody in the FinTube verse.
Hi, people. My name is Crysty. I'm a searcher.
When did you get involved in the chase, Crysty?
Probably 3 years ago. I read my first Some Magazine article and haven't looked back since. So. Right
on. Well, welcome. And Iron, I know you probably don't need much of an introduction. A lot of people already know you, but go ahead and say hi to everybody. And
hey, everybody. Iron Will. I've been in the chase almost 5 years now. Started back in 2014. I've been up to the Finberries. I'm affectionately known as the pie guy. So if you hear about those fried pies, it's usually me. But yeah, I've had a lot of solutions over the years, and I haven't given up on Montana as my state of choice. So hopefully it all works out.
Yeah, and I don't think my good friend Decall Thomas needs much of an introduction, but Decall, I'll let you introduce yourself and say hi to everybody in the chat.
Oh yeah, Decall Thomas, Facebook /Decall, friend me, email me, call me, whatever, dude. FennTreasure.com too.
So again, I want to welcome y'all to tonight's show. Tonight's show is titled The Blaze in Forrest Fenn's poem, What is its purpose and must we find it? Now, I know I'm probably going to get burned at the stake for even suggesting, do we have to find the blaze in order to find the treasure? But we will talk about that a little bit tonight. So really the purpose of this show tonight is to talk about, what is the purpose of the blaze? Is it simply to mark the treasure's location or something else? And we're going to go down this rabbit hole and discuss this and bring up a lot of quotes and talk about those things in a kind of an open discussion format. We'll also be watching for your questions in the chat room. If you have a question of the Flip Side or Decall or Iron Will, I know he's watching the chat room. Crysty, are you watching the chat room as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So Crysty, do you have a handle on YouTube that if you want to put that up there or tell everybody?
I commented. People can see it.
There you go. It's Crysty Fiorello. Is that right?
Fiorello, yeah.
Fiorello. Okay. So if you have a direct question of Crysty, you can, send it to her. You can send it to Iron Will, who's in there, or Decall Thomas as well. So we'll try and keep track of those again, guys. We know that we get in these discussions and, we focus on each other. And it's really hard to watch the chat room and keep up with the discussion between the panel members. But we're not trying to ignore you. It just happens. And you guys do a really good job of just chatting amongst yourselves anyway. So, I want to start off with, we're not really here tonight to talk about what we believe the blaze is. I think that there's been plenty of chatter along, in all the forums and on all the YouTube channels. And probably one of the better videos on the blaze is probably done by our good friend Shannon Oots. Decall, I know we've talked a lot about Shannon Oots' video. I think it's a great video. So we're really not here to talk about what we believe the blaze is, even though we may talk about that. That's not the main purpose of tonight's show. But, we cannot, it's kind of like we said, there's no real confirmations, or we believe there's no real confirmations we found that, or got any of these things right until we find the treasure. So we may not know what, in fact, the blaze is until we recover the treasure. But Forrest Fenn has kind of told us what the blaze or a blaze is supposed to be, has he not? Decall, William, Crysty, what do you think?
In a sense, he's given a lot of guidelines, but I see a lot of searchers. What they do is they try to interpret their own definition or their own meaning to make it fit a solution.
Sure.
When if you just go with your gut instinct on the definition of what he's saying when he answers something, he gives a lot of guidelines which could eliminate a lot of blazes. I won't say it will, but if you look at it logically, it can eliminate a lot.
I mean, I kind of disagree. I don't think that he's given us a lot of clues except to say like it's open to interpretation. You know, I mean, I think that's kind of what he said, actually.
And Decall?
All right, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. You don't want to talk about what the blaze is. You want to talk about or restate that for me, because
well, first of all, in order to really go down this rabbit hole, I think we need to clearly identify that I think Forrest Fenn has kind of given us a guideline as to what a blaze is supposed to be, at least in his definition. And I think if we go to, and what I was kind of hinting at is that Forrest gets mail from a middle school where he was asked several questions, and one of those questions was asked, and it was kind of asked in a wonky way, where one of the kids had asked, "What is blaze?" And do you guys recall what Forrest Fenn responded with that?
No.
I know all the questions that they asked him, but I cannot remember his response.
Crysty?
I don't know specifically which reference you're talking about now.
Yeah, he had said when asked by those middle school kids, they had said, you know, what is blaze? And Forrest Fenn had responded, anything that stands out.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, that may be somewhat of his interpretation or definition of what a blaze is. But if we have never had let's just say, you know, October 25th of 2010, Forrest Fenn just walked away from the chase and never said anything else. We never have been told by Forrest Fenn that in his interpretation, a blaze is anything that stands out, right? We wouldn't know that at all. We wouldn't know anything. We would just have the thrill of the chase. Decall will be back, so we just got to keep an eye on that. He jumps back in here. I'll look for him. So what I'm alluding to is, okay, how would we figure out what a definition of a blaze is?
I mean, I love talking about the blaze. I think there's a bunch of guidelines here from the 6 questions and the different mentions. And I definitely want to talk about what is the size of the blaze and what do we know about the blaze, and anything that stands out sounds good to me. But look at Forrest Fenn's personality for a second. He's a full page ad kind of guy, and a Yellowstone guy, and a big promoter kind of guy. Then you would think that the blaze is something sort of spectacular, not something boring, not something so interpreted, but something pretty obvious. And it is interesting that that someone has sent him a picture of the correct location, possibly the blaze, or someone has mentioned the blaze or something to Forrest Fenn. That's pretty interesting.
What I'm kind of alluding to is if Forrest Fenn has told us it's something that stands out, or anything that stands out, a blaze is anything that stands out. But if he hadn't mentioned that, how would we determine what, you know, the definition of a blaze is? Would we not just basically try and Google it and try and figure it out what it is, right? And if you look up the definition of a blaze, or if you look up blaze definition just on Google, it comes off, and the very first one that comes up is a very large or fiercely burning fire. Now, a blaze is, you know, obviously is a person, place, or thing, like a noun. He said you can't ignore any of the nouns. So technically it could be a very large burning fire or something. A lot of people have thought that it could have been a previous, you know, burn or something that happened in Yellowstone or somewhere else in the Rocky Mountain states. Well, the next definition is a very bright display of light or color. Okay, something that like catches your eye, right? It stands out. And then the next definition is a conspicuous display or outburst of something. Now that word conspicuous to me, I didn't understand its definition. And did you guys
Does that
even
mean
know what?
obvious or very standoutish?
Exactly. And if you look up conspicuous, the definition of conspicuous is standing out as to be clearly visible. And that kind of matches what Forrest Fenn has told us, has it not? I mean, he's told us a blaze is anything that stands out. So in that, when I went down those definitions, a blaze being a conspicuous display or outburst of something, I was like, well, what the heck does conspicuous mean? Honestly, I didn't really know for certain what it meant. But then when it said something that is standing out to be clearly visible, that really stood out to me, right? So it's something that's clearly visible and able to be discerned, right? It's Decall, kind of like you were saying, it's something that should be obvious, right? Should be obvious to us. Would we agree?
Well, I don't know. I mean, would anybody mind if I take 3 seconds and talk about my blaze?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
my blaze is I measured it the other day again. It's an 800 yard or 2,800 foot salamander cut in the side of a mountain. And symbolically, salamander is synonymous with fire, multiple lives. That's right. I don't mind multiple meanings for certain objects and something that does stand out. Even very rare was mentioned recently. I like the idea of something sort of rare, spectacular, standoutish, different, and meaningful, symbolically meaningful to Forrest Fenn.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, size has to be put in perspective here. We're not really sure what size of a blaze we're looking for. I really don't. I mean,
well, and that's going to be a big part of tonight's discussion. I mean, is it simply to mark the treasure and you look down at your feet, look quickly down, and there it is, or is it something completely else? And I think that what you're saying, size does matter, right? I mean, it could matter in this whole thing.
And look at, wouldn't you, if you're expecting something spectacular, how could it be small? How could it be insignificant? How could it be boring?
How could it be obvious? How could it be conspicuous? How could it be, very easily seen or discernible, right?
Unless it's
Crysty, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that nobody knows how big it is. I think we'll know when we find it. I mean, but if I could say, I've had a couple blaze solves, and my most recent was Red Canyon Rim, and I went up there, and I mean, I saw that, and it's an enormous blaze. And now looking back, it's like, okay, I really wouldn't know where to find the treasure, but looking at it, I mean, it's spectacular, and it would be a spectacular blaze if I could find the treasure, but I didn't. And so, I mean, I have smaller blazes that are tiny, and that's an enormous blaze. So
yeah,
I don't think we know until we know.
And that's the whole point, is that we don't, like I said in the beginning, we don't know what the blaze is. And we may only know that once we recover the treasure and go, oh, okay, well, that was what the blaze is. That had to have been it.
Right.
But and we may be able to believe we can identify what it is before we go boots on the ground, have a good idea what it may be. But until we find the treasure, we may not know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, but I think Forrest Fenn has kind of given us what a blaze is supposed to be, something that stands out. And before I go on from that, William or Iron, do you have anything to add to that? Or
well, honestly, first, I'm a man of logic before I use my imagination. And when we talk about and it's no hit on Decall, I'm trying to use Forrest's own words to rationalize, but when we talk about a huge salamander carved into the side of a stone, how long did you say that was, the salamander?
2,800 feet, 830 yards or something.
Okay, 830 yards. Forrest himself said, if you are smart enough to find the blaze, the distance between that and the treasure will be obvious. Now, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I agree.
So if it's 800 yards, how can it be obvious where the treasure's at? You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
And I think that question, and we can hit on it again later because you bring up something very key, Iron, can go either way. It could go with a blaze that is actually marks the treasure, or it could go with the blaze that is 10 miles away from the treasure, because then it will be obvious. If you're standing in the spot where the treasure chest is supposed to be, and there's a blaze there, and you look down and there's the treasure chest, well, yeah, the distance between the blaze and the treasure is obvious. Now, if you're standing where the treasure is supposed to be, and you figure the blaze is this thing that's off miles away, that's this huge thing, then the distance is obvious. Either way, it's one of those Fenn speak where you cannot, 100% discern what it means, and it's open to interpretation. Everything is open to interpretation.
Well,
so,
I've been looking hard for some sort of mechanism in the poem to actually put us within 12 feet or even 200.
Yeah.
What description and what sentence or line in the poem gives us distance, gives us measurement, gives us confidence, gives us specifics enough to look quickly down? He mentioned word distance. He mentioned other things. And it's all kind of confusing.
Sure.
I like what you jump into.
Very confusing.
Yeah, I like what you jump in there, Decall, about the I know it's a little off topic, but about the progression of the poem to get you within that 12 feet that he speaks of.
Yeah.
And it's like, I learned this on like the first 3 months of my research into that poem back in 2015. I learned that I cannot follow all these streams, these mountains, the canyons. I can't follow them by the poem and get within 100 feet by 100 feet by the time I get to like clue number 8. I just can't do it. So I had to start looking at it and say, well, Forrest has to start it off in a smaller area. Yeah. Somewhere in the poem, he has to start it in a smaller area so that it gets down to that 12-foot area by clue 9.
Well, let me give you a very quick example.
Yeah.
If I don't mind if I'm wrong, but if the first word of the poem "as" means arsenic, then that points very clearly to the 10 miles of river, because the 10-mile river is the highest arsenic concentration in the highest possible. There are many places,
and we're talking around the Fire Hole and the Gibbons, right?
Well, specifically the Too Far to Walk reference of that 10 miles of river is the highest levels of arsenic in the
Madison Junction or somewhere thereof down to Brown's Hole or Baker's Hole.
That could qualify as a mechanism. Now, I'm not trying to go into that. I'm just saying,
I understand.
Now, here's another example of mechanism. And I'm not trying to get away from the blaze, but there might be a solar aspect to the poem where you have 24 lines, 24 hours. That could qualify as a mechanism.
Does time really and I know that there's obviously a logical answer to this, but does time, as in the sun and everything else, also equate to distance?
Well, it could it could give you a clock face, which could be pointing to a specific, if you took true.
Well, and again, that this whole centers around what is the purpose of the blaze. A lot of people think that the blaze could be a way that the sun shines through something and creates, very simplistic, in a word, like the Indiana Jones when he was in that temple and it shone the light through. I've seen several examples of that where, this is very, kind of like National Treasure-esque, where the timely shadow where it reaches, and marks where the glasses were. There's all kinds of different things. But if I could just interrupt really quick and talk about one interpretation that I find in The Thrill of the Chase that may kind of coincide with what Forrest Fenn is talking about, the blaze, something that stands out. And this goes right to page 16 of The Thrill of the Chase, which is obviously the chapter First Grade. And in the very beginning of that, you guys remember, what is the first thing Forrest Fenn talks about is that his father was the principal of the school and that he had a sign that he put where he had to park. And I'm going to read from this really quick, and then we can discuss a little bit. He says, "My father was a teacher at Lanier School when I started first grade. And after a couple of years, he became the principal. His promotion was a really big deal because he got his own parking spot in front near the door where he went in. I remember standing there while he hammered the wooden sign into the ground. Mr. Fenn, principal. But I can't say the sign didn't make a difference in my life, because it did. No one else had a sign, so it was easy to notice, and I used to point it out to all the kids. He's saying that sign was easy to notice, and nobody else had a sign like that. It kind of is reminiscent of what he's talking about, the blaze. It's anything that stands out. We know it's not just a blaze, it's the blaze, right? So it should be the one thing that theoretically may stand out in that location, right?
I mean, I tend to think that the treasure's in a place that nobody ever goes. I mean, we're all going to the same places. And it's actually a little frustrating because people are carving in trees and leaving behind their own clues. And it gets confusing, honestly. But, you know, Forrest, you know, he cleared he cleared trails. He was a fishing guide, all these things. Like, I really think that the treasure is somewhere that we're not going. And so he can put a blaze that's very obvious, maybe something even like that he painted himself, he etched into a rock, something that's very obvious that, you know, the minute we see it, we're like, oh my gosh, that's
obviously it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing it because we're not in these hidden away places. We're, you know, largely going kind of all the same places, but this is somewhere that is way off the beaten path.
Not near a human trail. Yeah.
So if it is something that's obvious, that should be easy to notice, should be very conspicuous, it's supposed to be the blaze, we got to ask ourselves, okay, then those people that were the closest, those many people that were within 500 feet and the few or several people that have gotten within 200 feet, is it possible that those people were within visual distance of the blaze or Forrest Fenn's blaze?
I think 200 feet is still a long way. You know, we were up at Finbury looking for that A Gypsy's Kiss treasure, and I'm like trying to find how far everything is. 200 feet is a long way. 500 feet is a long way. So, I mean, in a forested area, these people weren't they weren't within visibility of the blaze, I don't believe. They were in a spot that was maybe more of a popular spot, but the treasure in the blaze, I don't believe was anything they could see. Absolutely not.
But go ahead, Decall.
Well, Stephanie asked, has anyone seen or mentioned the blaze to you? Forrest Fenn responded, thanks, Stephanie, for the questions. I've read them several times carefully. They appear subtle on the surface, but they aren't. A yes or no to either question would give too much away, so I'll pass. Sorry. And I'm aware that some searchers will pick me apart for this answer. F.
Go ahead, Decall.
Well, yeah, don't worry. You're not the seen or mentioned. See, if you take this question logically, all he has to do is say no. I mean, that doesn't require any giveaways or any problems or any emotion. He can just say no, nobody's mentioned it. And he didn't. He hemmed and hawed, which means, yes, somebody has seen them and mentioned the blaze. Okay, so we got to...
Possibly. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but you're right.
But the logic point...
Logically, we think that, yeah. Go ahead, Crysty.
And not necessarily the correct blaze, just the right blaze. Like, I mean, if somebody mentioned, you know, a white streak on the mountain and that's what it is, I mean, then he has to answer yes to that, even though that's not the correct blaze to the correct treasure.
Or maybe they just didn't know it was the blaze.
Yes, that's the problem. Maybe okay, you can mention the blaze or show a picture of the blaze, but you have no idea why you're there. That's the whole problem. Or maybe you don't understand the emotional or spiritual connection to Forrest Fenn.
But if these, William, I know you're itching. So anything you want to add in there before I add something? Because I don't want to derail this, and you probably got something you want to say towards this. But I think Christy's making an awesome point, and so is Decall. And I want to respond to those, but I want to give you a chance to that too.
You go ahead and get the response over. I was just reading. I was trying to find a spot in the book for a reference, but
okay. Well, I think what Crysty is saying is that those that were within 200 or 500 feet may have been under the impression that the blaze may be just something that is a marker for the treasure. And that's a possibility. And Decall bringing up what Stephanie's question was, and we all assume this is Stephanie Longanchor, that she asked the question, has anyone seen or mentioned the blaze to you? And Forrest Fenn did hem and haw. He's like, well, I've read all the questions, and, an answer to this would, could go either way. I don't have the exact quote, but I'm completely paraphrasing it. And Decall already got it. But they may have seen the blaze, but they may not have identified it as it being the blaze, because they may have been or had a preconceived idea that the blaze was something completely different. And why would they have an assumption of what the blaze is? If they're thinking it is something that is supposed to be small, and supposed to mark where the treasure chest is, why would they think that? And I'm not saying they were. We're just going down this thought process.
Yeah.
Because Crysty made the point that Crysty said it, if they're within 200 or 500 feet, maybe they just didn't see it. If it's supposed to be something that's conspicuous, it's supposed to be obvious, easily seen or noticed, a dazzling light display or conspicuous display or something,
fireworks.
Why didn't they see it? If they're within 200 feet, you'd think that they would see it.
And
unless they thought it was something small, right, Crysty?
Yeah. That kind of segues into the page I was looking for.
Okay, go for it.
Because everybody's looking for, and like I said, this is my opinion, and actually this is discussion about my opinion what the blaze is, so it'll vary from everybody else. But Forrest wrote in a book. He was, and I'll the Thriller's Chase. I think it was page 7. And he was talking with his father about a mechanic working on cars, and who do you want? You want to qualify? And he was asking him questions, and Forrest, really didn't seem interested, or he didn't know the answer to the question.
Yeah.
So he would just nod and stuff. And then he said, and this came out of the blue. Occasionally, it's wise for the fox to dress like the hound, and it stuck out to me why he said wise. And then had wise in the poem. And then I started thinking about a fox and a hound, which makes no sense in that argument, because in the conversation, he's just talking about mechanics, and the fox and the hound is a hunt. The hounds in Britain, the British people would take hounds and they would hunt after a fox. And what he's saying there in that statement is that it's wise for the fox to dress like what's hunting him.
Mm-hmm.
So now if you take that, and it's out of context, but I'm trying to transfer it into my solve. If you take that and you apply it to the poem, what if, and this goes directly to what Crysty and what you guys are saying about, well, how could they have missed the blaze? What if the blaze isn't what they thought it was? What if it's so common and it's man-made that it's something they see every day and they just didn't even look at it? Because Forrest
has some connection to Forrest Fenn, an emotional or spiritual connection to Forrest Fenn, right?
And Forrest has even said, and I think, and I don't want to pull quotes from Mindy over on Chase Chat, but he said something about Mindy asked him, so people have been going by the treasure and they're not looking around the same spot. And he said, no, Mindy, they're not looking at the right spot.
Yep.
So perhaps, and he's even stated that some people are not looking at what's right beside them. So maybe the blaze is not a mark on it can't be a mark on the tree. That's obvious. It can't be mark on the side of a rock, because he's already said it doesn't face any of the cardinal directions.
Yeah, or that's completely up to debate. Again, that's
yeah. Because a lot of people say, well, he didn't say southwest; he said south or west.
Exactly.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I mean, again, he leaves things open to interpretation, right, Crysty?
I mean, my personal thought is I don't think people have solved it. I think that they've gotten close. I mean, he said people have correctly solved the first 2 clues and then they walk right past the rest. So I feel like people have gotten close to the treasure area, and then they have not solved the rest of the clues. And so even though they're within 200 feet, 200 feet in a forest is a long way. So they just have not found it. And I feel like if they correctly solved the poem, they would find the blaze. I mean, I would honestly be super disappointed if it was just like nothing that stuck out,
Sure.
I mean, that's the definition of the blaze is something that stands out. So
well, he said, you know, and this is, I think Forrest Fenn Gets Mail 9. This came from November of 2015 when he was asked, you know, some searchers have come close. And he said, yeah, some people have been within 200 feet. Some may have solved the first 4 clues, but I am not certain. You know, again, I'm a 9 clues, 9 sentences guy. And those first 4 clues, if you start with begin at where warm waters halt and each is a sentence, the blaze falls within those first 4 clues. Mm-hmm. If he's not certain that they didn't solve the first 4 clues, or they may have, but he's not certain, then they may not have known exactly what the blaze is. They were just guessing, you know.
Do you think there's any relationship between where warm waters halt and the blaze? Since and I mean, that's begin it where warm waters halt and your quest to cease. That's the beginning and the end of your actual journey. It appears in the poem. That's what it seems like to me. Do you
he's
an actual relationship symbolically or spiritually or like kind of
geographically?
Like,
why not? Let's just get, I mean, I'm the pragmatic one here.
But T.S. Eliot style, you know, come back. Sure. I'm just wondering why.
We'll arrive at where we began and know the place for the first time or something along that.
Yeah, it's, I know what.
Well, there could be a correlation between, hasn't he always said that if you don't know where warm waters halt, you don't have anything? If you don't have the correct starting point, you don't have anything. Well, okay. What does he say about the person who asked him how far is the treasure from the blaze? And he said, Casey, I didn't take the measurement. But logic tells me is if you don't know where the blaze is, it really doesn't matter. If you can find the blaze, the answer to your question will be obvious. What does he say? If you don't know where the blaze is, if you don't know where warm waters halt, everything revolves around where. Again, I've said this many, many times. In my opinion, the first clue is not warm waters halt, it's where. You're trying to figure out the starting point. And if you don't have the correct starting point, you might as well stay home and play canasta, you know? And so there is a correlation, in my opinion, of what you're saying there. If I'm making sense to you, Decall, of between where warm waters halt and the blaze, they all should be in that geographical location. We're all out there trying to run around, trying to find the correct state, you know, where we all debate about what state it's in, you know, I mean, it's this whole debate and it really, and people like read Rich is New and Old and they think New Mexico, they think, so why is I must go? And they think, you know, Wyoming, you know, they look at the front of the book and it's got, you know, you turn it upside down, it's got the treasure in Montana. So they think Montana, you know, and I'm not saying any of that is wrong. I'm just saying there's just so many subjective opinions, but what if the poem alone tells us that correct story? I mean, that's what it's supposed to do, right? Go ahead,
what we were discussing a while ago, you know, he said that things were open to interpretation. When I was mentioning it couldn't be a FF on a tree. You know, a lot of people have seen that because a lot of people have trolled searchers just by putting FF there just to say, okay, if you come out here, you know, you're going to think this is it. I've seen this over 5 years. I've probably seen it 24 times. I've seen FFs on trees, but
but okay, Will, why would people think that a mark on a tree or a mark on a rock is the blaze? Why would people think that?
I'm not trying to figure out how the right way to say it. Before Forrest made that response in the featured question, I think it was a featured question, they didn't have a reason to. But after he said, and this is paraphrasing a direct quote, he says, yes, the blaze can be removed. It's not impossible to remove the blaze, but it certainly isn't feasible to try.
Right.
Okay.
While it's not impossible to remove the blaze, it's not feasible to try. And I'm certain it's still there.
If there's an FF on a tree, then you can easily scrub that FF off the tree. Yeah. It's so easy to do that.
Yeah. And take it home. Yeah. Take the blaze home. Yeah.
Let's, let me just throw a couple of quotes out there. And these are things that may, in people's mind, believe that the blaze is something small. and we can discuss each one of those. But this was out of Mysterious Writings. It was a surprise words from July 14th of 2016, so nearly 3 years ago. And there was a question that said, Mr. Forrest, I was just wondering, if I can find the blaze, why should I worry about where warm waters halt? All I need to do is look quickly down, like the poem says, and there is the treasure, right? Question mark. And Forrest Fenn responds, that's correct, Philly. But that's not a plausible scenario. If you can find a fish already on your hook, you needn't go fishing, right? Don't force those kind of aberrational thoughts on yourself, or you will likely walk back to your car with a very light pack. So it seems like Casey's asking this question or Philly, excuse me, is asking the question, hey, if I find the blaze, all I got to do is look quickly down. And there's the treasure, right? And then Forrest Fenn turns around and says, that's right. I mean, if I was a person that believed, and I'm not saying I do or I don't, that a blaze is a mark on a rock, a permanent mark on a rock, or a permanent mark on a tree, then all I got to do is look quickly down, like the poem says, and there's the treasure, right? My quest to cease.
Yeah.
But
That would be, that to me would stand out as like confirmation that my belief is correct. A mark on a tree, right?
Before Decall jumps in there, because I know he's wanting to contradict, but before I just want to support Sean on this one thing. Well, not just one thing. You've got many things I'll support, but what you're saying about it's in the poem. If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down. So that gives you a close proximity. And also, he said, if you're smart enough to find the blaze, then the distance or the answer to your question is obvious about the distance to that.
If you know where the blaze is. If
to
you can
me,
find
I believe,
the blaze,
I believe the blaze is probably, and like I said, this is just logic speaking. This is not certainty or anything, but I believe the blaze is probably 20 feet or less. And it's
you're talking about the distance or the size?
No, the size of the blaze. The size of the blaze is 20 feet or less. I believe you can see it from Google Maps because he's already said a question that you can complete 100% of the progress in theory. You can do it from home, from your computer. Yeah. And he says, but in practice, probably not, because you have to be there to get the treasure.
No, what he says to that is he said, rocking chair ideas can lead one to the first two clues.
No, it's a different one.
Okay, what's the other quote then? Which one is that?
I would have, if you'll give me 10 minutes to look it up, I have to find it. But he said it was a featured question. Somebody asked him.
Didn't he say that the last clue, though? The last clue was.
They said they could. They said they could.
That was to Serge Tellenbaum. He said, "What is the most important clue, or what is the one clue I need to solve this?"
Could he solve the poem, make full progress or something from home at their computer? And he said, in theory, yes.
Yes, but not likely in practice. One.
Yeah, and then he said,
still needs to go to location to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that tells me, at home you can see the blaze. So it has to be within 20. And I would say to 10 feet big, because you have to see it on Google Maps.
Yeah.
So, and it has to be within 20 feet of the treasure. I would say 20 feet is a reasonable distance. I mean, it could be 30 feet. I'm just saying it's got to be in that distance, because if you are not within 20 to 30 feet, I don't think you find it, even if you find the blaze, because it's just too far away. You know what I'm saying? It's like if it's 100 feet from the blaze, how are you going to find it over 100 feet, a little 10-inch by 10-inch box?
Well, I mean, he says your quest to cease. He doesn't say your quest is done. He says to cease. Yeah. He used the infinitive. The word to is an infinitive, to cease. He's not saying look down, your quest is done, grab it, get the hell out of there, and then spend it wisely. He's saying your quest to cease. Crysty, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, we're talking about, if you stumble upon this small blaze or whatever, but I mean, what happens if the blaze is actually large, but what you're looking for is the right route to the blaze, which is a small opening. So all of a sudden there's this opening and you see this beautiful grandeur.
Butt crack rock, Justin. Minotaur Marino loves you now, Crysty. It's butt crack rock. I know, and I mean it's absolutely.
But I mean, like you talk about in Yellowstone, some of the guys, some of the geothermal features, like everybody can see it, but you got to go and to the one way that Forrest went to his secret spot that everyone is seeing the same thing, but only you are now close to the treasure. So, I mean, that's one thing to consider, that, I mean, the blaze could be big, but it's the specific route to the treasure that you have to find.
Yeah. And then, but then if it's large, then how do we know where to look quickly down at? You know, if it's this.
Well, I mean,
thing,
but that's the thing is if you're on the right path and you all of a sudden see this magnificent thing, whether it's, you know, Red Canyon Rim or a geyser or a waterfall, for instance, waterfall,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, look
that.
at his story in Thrill the Chase where he saw the waterfall and then he tripped over the thing. I mean, what if we all visit the same waterfall and 200 feet away is the treasure on the ground, but you had to go the right direction to get there. And then the treasure's right there as soon as the waterfall's in view.
Hey, Sean, I just wanted the chat was talking about when I was mentioning that, you know, you should be able to see it from Google Maps. I believe it was Rodney Greenway said, Forrest said you can't see the blaze on Google Earth. And I believe that's inaccurate. I believe he said you can't see the treasure from Google Earth. You can't see the chest.
I don't think, Rodney, I mean, if you believe that's accurate, please cite the, you know.
Yeah, I would love that.
We all want to see that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if that's true, that would be, I hate
That'd be a game
groundbreaking,
changer.
But
Right
I think Iron's correct in the fact that he's saying that you cannot, and this comes out of the Moby Dickens interview from 2013, November 2nd, where he said, you know, no, because Google Earth doesn't go down far enough.
Hey, I want to go back to the Philadelphia Franklin question.
Okay.
Just quickly, this whole idea that if he just had the blaze, he could look quickly down. But the reason this scenario is aboriginal and doesn't really work is because there must be some meaning. There must be some meaning that leads you to the blaze that gets you there, kind of like Warm Waters Halt or the beginning and the end sort of concept.
I think a big part he's saying there is that it's kind of like that whole Homer Brown versus Warm Waters Halt. If somebody could find the Homer Brown, could they reverse engineer where Warm Waters Halt? And Forrest Fenn had said something about the fact, well, if you're so certain about, you know, where the Homer Brown is or what the Homer Brown is or whatever, why are you even concerned about where Warm Waters Halt? You might as well grab some beer and, you know, your friends will throw in some gas money for the take.
To it, yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of very similar to that question where he's, you know, somebody's asking him, you know, if I was certain about, you know, the blaze, why should I be concerned about where Warm Waters Halt?
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to, he answered something very similar to that in the Lure interview from 2017. I've got to read this because this is not a normal quote that I'm familiar with. I can't remember what the question was, but this was all centered around, you know, Forrest Fenn, are you still burying things? And she was talking about bells. And I hate that whole interview. I think it was a complete ambush on Forrest Fenn, but
yeah, it was.
It was, I mean, in my opinion, but Forrest Fenn responded, you can't go out looking for the blaze and expect to find the treasure chest. There's 10 billion blazes out there. Yeah. So you have to start with the first clue, which you know is begin at Warm Waters Halt, and let it take you to the blaze. So he's saying you can't, I mean, there's 10 billion blazes out there. He's also said before, and I completely paraphrase, you got people driving down the road looking for a blaze because it's a clue in the poem. You can't do that. You can't start in the middle of the poem and expect to solve this thing. I mean, it would be a complete miracle if you could. That's paraphrasing about 3 different quotes combined together, but you can't do that. And if the blaze is supposed to be that one obvious thing in the area that we're in the correct area of, we've got to find that correct starting point. Otherwise, we're just driving down the road looking for a random blaze.
We got to find the connection between the starting point and the ending point. Maybe it's water. Maybe, you know, one theory I had, it was water flowing to water, like one continuous series of molecules of water continuously touching from beginning to end. That's not a bad idea, whether it's even plausible or not, but
well, from Warm Waters Halt to what a lot of people believe the blaze is, which could be that water high, which could be, I think Crysty was kind of alluding to that out of his book in the Thrill of the Chase, right, Crysty?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you were talking, go on that. I mean, that's, a lot of people think the blaze is a waterfall.
Yeah, you know, I was looking in a place in Colorado and everything on the map looked great. I didn't have a blaze, obviously. But as I was, looking online in the area, some people had posted a video of this beautiful waterfall that they had like went off the trail several hundred feet, and it was like they'd never seen it. And it was like the perfect blaze. I mean, it was like 4-tiered with a perfectly, straight. And I'm not a big waterfall, like blaze kind of person. But when I saw this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like exactly the blaze. But then, so I'm trying to find this waterfall. And there's the only video I can ever find is the one video I called the Forest Service, all these people, nobody knew how to find it. I mean, it was absolutely a hidden waterfall. Nobody knew where it was at. And it was right at the end of my search. So I was like, and so I went to look for it, but the road was washed out and it was raining. But I like the idea of a blaze, of a waterfall, because it's water high. He talks about it, in the chapter of the book. And I like the idea that when you see it, the chest is on the ground as like him paying homage to the soldiers. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's, in the waterfall, he says it's not underwater, but it's wet. So, I mean, the blaze could be anything. And I'm not set on a waterfall, but I think a hidden waterfall that not a lot of people go to would be a reasonable blaze.
Here's and I'm not trying to pick on you, Crysty, but here's the
Sure.
one thing I have kind of against a waterfall is that there's certain things out in Mother Nature that we're all attracted to, that we as people, not everybody as a person likes to go out in the mountains and go hiking. Let's just admit to that. There's people that live in New York that love to live in New York and never see the stars, and that's perfectly fine. They come out to the Rocky Mountains or Montana or somewhere, they're like, oh my God, there's a sky, and they'll never set foot in the Rocky Mountains somewhere, and that's just their life. They don't want to do. But people like us that, and I say us, I mean, people that like to be out in Mother Nature and go hiking and do all those kinds of things, we're attracted by things like a waterfall. We're going to follow a creek till we get to that, and we're going to go there and be attracted to that. That, in my opinion, would potentially cause somebody to stumble upon the treasure chest, because we're attracted to those kind of things. And we're going to go to that waterfall and, oh my God, we accidentally stumble upon, Forrest Fenn's treasure. And we have no idea. We have no connection, no emotional connection to this whole treasure hunt. We just stumble upon it and we got lucky. And Forrest Fenn has said, someone's not supposed to be lucky. I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm just saying in my mind, I'm like, I just don't see him placing it next to a waterfall because people are attracted to those things. And now doesn't mean it can't be buried or can't be under a rock with a fin and somebody wouldn't, a mark with an F and somebody else wouldn't notice it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just going through these emotions and trying to talk about those things.
And to counter that, I 100% agree with you if it's a waterfall that's well known, that is well trafficked. But if it's a hidden waterfall that people don't know about, first of all, second of all, if just a few people find it, the chance of them finding this tiny box that's hidden, if they're not looking for it, is still, they're probably not going to find the box. But thirdly, I mean, the fact that he had this, probably one of his most, top 2 or 3 significant life experiences at a waterfall.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking for waterfalls, but if it's a waterfall, I wouldn't be surprised because it was such a significant experience for him, So, but it would have to be a hidden waterfall that people don't go to. I mean, that's my thought.
So how do you, with the waterfall, I'm not saying that's your blaze. If it's your blaze, that's great. And you're not confirming that that's your blaze.
Sure.
But how do you, if you believe that the waterfall is the blaze, then how do you coincide with Forrest Fenn, that whole, Forrest Fenn gets mail from a middle school, that you guys seem to be hung up on waterfalls. Stop trying to force fit my poem to your, my ideas to your poem.
Right. And I've read that. And I don't think that he was saying it wasn't a waterfall. He's just saying, don't try to fit your idea into this. Start it where water's whole. But he didn't say, he's never said it's not a waterfall. And I'm not fighting for the waterfall.
Again, it's completely open to interpretation.
Right.
What you said, Sean,
but how do we come up with that idea of a waterfall?
Yeah,
exactly like you say, is that water high, we coincide that because we read My War for Me, and he has a very special, life altering experience at this waterfall in this clearing that he made a promise to. It stands out as a very large emotional thing in his life. I would completely agree with you on that, Crysty.
And not to mention that he trips over the soldiers, a metal gravestone. He trips over it. I mean, I think it would just be so beautiful and perfect if this treasure was on the ground in the grass, 100 feet from a 100-foot waterfall. That's a hidden waterfall. I mean,
it's that
I'm more of a romantic. I mean, I'm hoping that whenever the treasure is found, it's like this amazing, this was brilliant, not like.
And Decall would completely agree with you on that, because he believes that there should be some emotional tie. And I get that. I'm the pragmatic here. I get that. And I try and force those aberrational thoughts away from my mind, but I'm not saying that wouldn't inspire me as well.
Well, I think
I'd
just
be like, oh, that's freaking awesome.
There's thousands of blazes possible out there. Okay. but there isn't thousands of blazes that are emotional and important to Forrest Fenn. So I do think it's relative. I think there's context. I think we get the context of the blaze from the book and the poem. You can choose a route of grammar, or you can choose a route of things important to Forrest Fenn. I think there are hints of it in the book from a very straightforward point of view, but that's my style, you know. I mean, my salamander is within a quarter mile of the cover of the book, where he's sitting on the horse. I think that's playing the game correctly, because he's kind of making the point that it's on the cover of his book, so therefore it's important and emotional. Okay, we're not the ones to decide why or how it's emotional to him, but how can it be spectacular and still emotional to him and undiscovered at the same time, or unknown by the search community? That's kind of hard to figure out, but how do we identify and confirm the blaze, you know, and then look quickly down is another issue.
Sure. Well,
Sean,
yeah, go ahead, Iron. Go for it.
You got Marble
like 50
Mom.
million questions, I know.
Yeah, well, not really questions. I think Marble Mom was responding to Crysty. She said, if it was a hidden waterfall, why would many people have been close to it? As Forrest has stated.
I think that's a confirmation that it could. Well,
hey, if I could actually address that, like I said, I found my my whole poem from the start to the beginning, and there's forest roads, there's trails nearby. And the only reason I was looking around, you know, because I like to do that. I like to look up YouTube videos, people who've flown drones over the area. I'm always like, I want to see the land. And in my searching for that area, I found this one couple that had found the waterfall, and they're like, we can't even believe we stumbled upon it. It was, you know, it was like 300 feet away. It was off the trail. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. And just seeing the waterfall was so beautiful. Calling the Forest Service and saying, what is this waterfall? Where do I find it? You know, and nobody could tell me anything, how to get there. It's 100% a hidden waterfall that someone stumbled upon that's also close to a trail, you know, within 200 to 300. So if someone said, I went on this trail looking for your treasure, they're automatically within 200 to 500 feet of the blaze, you know, of the waterfall. So, I mean.
Yeah, and Mama Llama says here, and panel, didn't Forrest say it's not near a waterfall? No. Mama Llama, no. He never said it's not near a waterfall. No, he's never ruled it out.
I like waterfall idea. I don't mind it at all. I think it's a good logic. I mean, why not? I mean, that he said that was a very spiritual moment that he made that promise to come back. So okay, we got to take that serious, you know, as a spiritual
water high. I mean, a lot of people believe that water high could be, you know, in reference to a waterfall.
And if I could just add this resource, you guys have been around longer than me, you probably know about it, but this guy, Doug Scott art. Yep. Okay. So he has he does recon. He does, he's not associated with the treasure as far as I know, but he has a page of every waterfall in New Mexico and some in Colorado, every natural arch. And so you guys already know about it. And also the canyons, which I thought was fantastic to like, look at all the canyons to visually see all these places in New Mexico. I think it's a great resource.
Yeah, been to a lot of them. It is a great. I'm glad you brought that up, Crysty. A very good resource. And yeah, absolutely. And
I want to email the guy and say, "Bro, go look for the treasure."
And he will respond to you. Doug Scott is very good. I've emailed him a few times. He's very good about response. So email him. Yeah. Absolutely. And I've asked him a lot of questions about ones I've wanted to go to, and he's given me a lot of good information and advice. You know, to go see him. So yeah, absolutely. Good.
Could I add something real quick?
No.
No. Yes. I just wanted to say, you guys are referencing Thrill the Chase. There is one place in the book that you already probably know about that I thought stood out as kind of like a hinty blaze thing, and it's in the chapter of Red Canyon Rim, looking for Lewis and Clark. On the 2 pages, I won't read the whole thing, but he basically says, you know, Donnie Joe, we were going to go out to look for Lewis and Clark. He was quick to take the hint, which I thought was a keyword. And then it says, we rented a couple of horses and we started up Red Canyon. The horse was named Lightning, which is also a blaze, right? And then it says they got their map that came in really handy. And then they very wisely wadded up the map and as the fire crackled. Yes. So you have lightning, you have a hint, lightning, you know, map,
fire.
Fire.
Yeah.
So if I was ever looking for a hint in the thrill of the chase. I mean, those 2 pages is chock full.
You know what I love about that, and I'm glad
Mhm.
you brought that up. I completely forgot about this, is that it's funny that they needed the map in order to create the fire, right?
Right.
And a fire is somewhat considered a blaze. So
Right.
once they had the blaze, they no longer needed a map, right?
Mhm.
The map was gone.
Right.
Nice.
So
nice.
you need the map in order to get you to the correct area to figure out what the blaze is or where the
Right.
blaze is. Once you understand that, you no longer need the map, right?
And,
Unless you're going to get stuck in the bush for 40 days.
yeah,
They have
like
used
that.
some mountain man wisdom after that. To
Yeah,
get their
I
ass
like
out of there, right?
And I like Christy's train of thought. I love the way you broke that down.
Yep.
I have always said that I thought that Searching for Lewis and Clark is a very important story. It fits me perfectly. But if he mentioned wise, I mean, that could be pointing to the blaze.
Mhm.
I also think that, I mean, I've studied it in depth. I know exactly where he was. I know about how many days he was out. He's exaggerated many of the points there, what the distance is. I know exactly where he went out. And I believe that Forrest Fenn knew exactly where he came out. And I think he kept that hidden for a reason. I think, you know, when people talk about low hanging fruit, that's basically it. He didn't talk about where they came out. He only talked about where they came in. And I think has significance. That is one of the earliest stories, is the Lewis and Clark story, along with My War for Me, and therefore has a higher significance. It was very important that he write that story early on. And I think it does hold a high priority in our resources for solving the poem. And it is interesting, this wise having a correlation with the blaze. I don't know if it's subconscious or fully intentional. I believe it's intentional. I think there's a lot of correlation, just like Crysty pointed out, in that story. And it's my favorite story in the entire book. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, here's a question from Drawing Nigh.
Yep.
And I think maybe this might be interesting for all 4 of us to kind of, we don't have to go into our exact details, but we can just give our idea. She says, to the flip side, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, which element of nature is your blaze?
Yeah, and I did respond to her. I said earth. I believe it is earth.
Fire.
Yes. Okay. Mine's a combination. Mine's man-made. It's not nature.
Sure.
Yep.
That brings
Crysty,
up
what is yours?
Oh yeah, sorry.
If you want
I honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm torn between, like, you know, a beautiful overlooking meadow and a waterfall and a petroglyph or something. So the mix of all 3.
Well, in a word, earth, air, fire, water is all part of Mother Nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God,
And I think it could be, you know, something Forrest, like you said, something made. He says it's, you know, he's qualified that, but I think he could have made it himself.
Iron says he believes it's something that's man-made. There's not, and I've said this many times, there's not some sign out there that says, welcome to the blaze. Right?
No.
So it is something that is the blaze to just Forrest. It is something that is his blaze. It's not something out there, the sign that says, here is the blaze brought to you by Mr. Forrest Burke Fenn. You know, I mean, so it is his blaze because he's created it in his poem. And he's supposed to have, the poem is supposed to lead us to that blaze. So it's his blaze. So is it man-made? I don't know if it's necessarily man-made, but it's this man has made it his own, I guess is the word.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, would he claim, let's say the blaze had somebody's name already on it. Does that make sense that he would claim the blaze for his own? Now, my blaze is man-made, so I'm not disagreeing with Iron Will at all. But what if Forrest Fenn had something to do with the creation of the salamander? Or what is it? What if he claimed it as this unclaimed art? What if he claims the blaze as his own in a very respectful way? I think it's a possibility. Like my mini lake could also be the blaze. It's a circle dot. It's a floating hat. Has a perfect grave in the center, and it pays homage to Minnie Hollywood, who fought in the Battle of Little Bighorn as a woman and was able to receive the headdress. So that pays honor to women and women's rights and women's suffrage. So that would make sense that the blaze pays tribute to the proper person, and that Fenn doesn't necessarily have to claim the blaze as his own. But what is that emotional attachment? There is some good ideas out there.
Yeah. Well, let's I want to move this forward, but I want to hit on a couple of key things that we've talked about as far as the blaze being potentially something that is small and something that is large. And I want to just try and go through this, thought process with each of us. And I want to refer back to, if we're talking about the blaze could be something potentially small, like a mark on a tree. I want to go back to an article that came out, I think it was in 2014, called The Everlasting Forrest Fenn. And this came out of a California Sunday edition. And I'm going to go over to my thing here. I'm not going to share my screen, but I'm going to read this for you guys. And there was a paragraph out of here. I'm going to read it verbatim, and you guys can go find this. I'll try and put it in the link, or I'll put a link in the description below for you guys to find this. The author states, out in the sculpture garden, and this is talking about the author of this article went out with Forrest Fenn out to the Fenn Matucci galleries, and he's going out into the sculpture garden with Fenn. And out in the sculpture garden, Fenn beckoned me over and gestured toward the trunk of a thick white poplar tree. And this is in quotations. See the F carved in there? That's my initial. The letter was barely legible now, a gray-brown knot that I never would have noticed if he hadn't pointed it out. Never had noticed, right? Fenn waved distastefully at another blur of gray farther up the tree. There was an F there, but they're obliterated now. So it's like he's stating that a blaze on a tree is not going to last. It's something it's just going to go away. And it's almost like he testing out blazes on a tree to see what they would look like over time. I mean, because he had the Matucci galleries from 72 to 88, right? So he had it for 16, 17 years. Was he marking F's in that tree after he got cancer and was like, well, would this last? Well, they're obliterated now. It's almost like he's confirming that a blaze or a mark on a tree is just not going to last very long. Yeah. It's very temporary. And doesn't he state in one of the scrapbooks, I can't remember which one this was, but he talks about where he had a bunch of aspen trees in his backyard that had blazes on them. One was a very famous one of the Running Man with the helmet on.
And he cut it right out.
Because all the aspen trees went away, right?
To possibly save it from deteriorating more. Because if left out in the weather, would be just ruined in another season of laying on the ground. It's supposed to decompose. But I really love the Running Man symbolism. This doodle art that's everywhere kind of drives me nuts. Rick IG, he goes into it a little. I think there's meaning to it. Maybe the blaze does.
We're all chasing something, right?
Yeah. I mean, so when we're looking for the blaze, we're just looking for ideas that fit, and we've got to pick an area or multiple areas. I kind of like that.
We should know the area.
Well, no, Crysty is searching and has been searching in different states. Other people have been
unfortunately.
Well, I don't mind that. I mean, in Jingle Bell Rock every year, people search a lot of different places, and they're the most successful people in that game is the ones that search in multiple locations. So I don't mind that at all.
I just think it has to fit. I think it's going to be magic when it fits, and
it's going to make sense. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, I got a question here that maybe all of us could answer.
Okay.
Otis Mago said, "Who thinks the blaze is not white?" So maybe that's an opinion for each one of us.
I don't think it matters. I think it could be anything. I mean, I think that if it's something etched, it could be a color. It could be on something white. It could be something that's dark on something white. I don't think it's white. And Forrest has never said it's white.
Well,
It's almost like he's avoided the white, you know.
Right.
Decall, you and I talked a little bit about this offline, I think, and I brought up a conversation that I was having with Jenny Kyle over on Mysterious Writings, and she had said something very similar to what this person had posed, and I had posed to Jenny. You know, she had said something about, you know, must the blaze be white? And my response to Jenny was, all of the time. You know, if we go back to when Forrest Fenn talked about, you know, lost treasure thoughts. And it was about this whole, you know, what is the treasure chest thinking now? But in that, he said, you know, that something about the long-tailed ermine was changing back into a weasel. So weasels and ermines go through what's called a molt. They transform from one color to another. You know, and Decall, you and I have talked about, you know, Forrest Fenn has a lot of symbolism of frogs, you know, dragonflies, and even you know, pardon this, Crysty, and you could totally beat us up about this, but women as well. You know, they go through a transformation. They go from being a young girl to a woman. You know, a dragonfly metamorphoses from one thing to another. A butterfly metamorphosizes from one thing to another. Yeah. Is it Mother Nature also metamorphosizes? We go through, you know, seasons of spring, you know, summer, fall, winter. So is the blaze white year round? It could be white part of the year. I mean, we got snow on the ground, right? So theoretically, it could be white at some point in time. And it was just a thought process we were going through. And Decall and I were talking a little bit about that too. And Jenny and I were talking about it. It was an interesting. It doesn't mean it's true, but
well,
how the heck did I get on that? I don't know.
Forrest answered the question. Did you really say the blaze is a white streak, as has been rumored? No, I did not say that. There's a lot of bad information floating around. And then he talks about some other stuff. Yeah.
I think there's colors involved because for a lot of the things Forrest has said, in one of his scrapbooks, I think he talks on being an artist, or one of his writings, and he says, if you want to be an artist, learn how the colors of the rainbow meld into each other. And he talks a lot about colors in his writing. And he even says, you know, begin at where warm water salt. And of course, that's the literal, you know, temperature. But I like to think of it as being a color, you know, and then he talks about the home of brown.
Tea with Olga, they change different colors of tea.
Different colors. And then he says, you know, at the end of his rainbow, and especially him talking about, you know, imagination so much. I like the idea of it being a color journey, or, you know, a literal, like you end up in like violet meadows or somewhere at the end of a rainbow that has to do with a color. And maybe the blaze isn't a color, but I think that I like to think that it's something.
That's a cool thought. I like that. Yeah. I mean, warm as in red, and then you're transferring to a different color. Yeah. I like that. The color of water is normally blue. That's part of a different color. It's interesting. Yeah.
I kind of go from fire hole, which would be red. The journey is black, and the final water high is green. Mini Lake. I like the color, the journey and color.
Also, if I could just say too, sorry to cut you off. He says the end is ever drawing nigh, like drawing as in art. Again, we're going back to artists, the palette, you know, and Terry Scant with marvel gaze. I mean, this is whatever we're looking at, whatever we're going for is something beautiful. And he's laying out the artist palette in front of us.
Yeah, and I mean, if the man has said that this is the place where he wants to rest his bones forever, that he was planning to take 50 sleeping pills and close his eyes for eternity, do you want to look at what do you want to look at?
Right.
You know, I mean, do you want to just look at a plain old rock, or do you want to have a beautiful view that's going to be the last thing that you see before you shut your eyes for eternity?
Yeah, there's got to be a beautiful marvel.
And I'm just tying that into what Christy's saying, because I think there is something to that, I think.
Well, what me and Decall were talking about at the very beginning, I think this really ties in. If you took the sleeping pills and you wanted to, and I hate to talk about that because nobody wants to see Forrest die for at least another 10 years, but if you took those sleeping pills at your special place, at your dear place, it doesn't have to be of you. It just has to connect with you. It has to be the place that you think is so dear to your memory, to your mind. It doesn't have to be a waterfall. It doesn't have to be a great meadow.
But
it doesn't have, you know.
You're absolutely right, but it breaks down. Is it somewhere that's beautiful because he says marvel gaze, or is it somewhere that was just specifically a cathartic experience for him? Yeah. And we don't know that. It could be somewhere that makes literally no sense, that his father looked at him in his eyes and said, "You're amazing and I love you." I mean,
it makes no sense to us. You're absolutely right, Crysty. Know. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yep.
But he does hint about it. The sitting down next to the tree. Without very many people around and enjoying the solitude or whatever.
Letting his bones go back to the dirt. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
we're the only animal that doesn't do that.
Yeah. Where you can hear the sounds of nature. And in the book and in other scrapbooks, he's talking about what the area looks like and sounds like and smells like, and not near a human trail. It's a kind of a very relatively clear image, classic of the Rocky Mountains, but pretty solitude, pretty, calm.
Yep. So let's try and tie this in a little bit here and move on. I want to bring up something that Iron Will brought up, and that is the one quote. And this goes back to, I think it was 2014 or 15 over on Del Neitzel's site, where Forrest Fenn admitted to meeting with a couple of searchers, and he was trying to clarify something. And that quote came out, and I don't have the exact link to this, guys, but the quote came out, said, "While it's not impossible to remove the blaze, it isn't feasible to try. And I'm certain it's still there." Mm-hmm. So that really tends to tie into something that is not small, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, that it doesn't tie into something like a mark on a tree or a mark on a rock, because in my opinion, those are things that are very feasible to remove. But what is very key about his statement, in my opinion, is that he says, "And I'm certain it's still there." Now, how is he certain that it's still there? If it's a mark on a tree or a mark on a rock, and he admits to never being back to that location since hiding the treasure chest, how does he know that that mark or rock that is supposed to mark the treasure's location, if we believe that, is still there? He can't.
But he can. He can, if in theory you can solve it from home, which means you can.
No. I'm saying if he's certain it's still there, and he's never returned to that iron, and it can't be seen from Google Earth, theoretically, a mark on a tree can't. I mean, as much as I've looked down on Google Earth, I can't see it. How is he certain that the blaze, we're talking about the blaze, not the treasure, how is he certain that the blaze is still there if he's never returned to it, if it's supposed to be a mark on a tree or a rock?
But you're saying theoretically that you can't see it on the map. I'm saying theoretically you can, because those were his words. Theoretically, you can solve the poem at home, which means you can see the blaze from home on the map.
I like that.
Theoretically, you can have the idea of what the blaze is, and that you're going to go to the spot and look for that blaze, but not likely in practice. What I'm saying here is he's saying that it's not impossible to remove the blaze, but he's still certain is there. How is he certain? How is Forrest Fenn certain that the blaze is still there?
Well, if you had a good satellite image, you could have a current day satellite image, and you could verify it's there right now. You could. Okay.
Like if it was a mark on a tree. Or a mark on a rock.
I mean, okay, you can see every tree. So if you know which tree has the mark, well, I suppose you could remove the mark and leave the tree.
We could remove the whole tree, sure.
But the tree's still there. You could see it with satellite. I believe Forrest Fenn has the possibility of seeing everything that happened today in the area on live satellite. You could pay for that service. That would be very interesting. I think
there's a lot of hackers out there that could probably figure out what Forrest Fenn is checking.
Here's a sample. It's just an example. It's not real. I'm just trying to use it as an argument. But let's say Forrest poured a cylindrical white concrete formation in the ground that sticks up about 6 feet out of the ground. And like I said, this is not realistic. It's just an example. He poured that and set it where you can see it in the open on Google Maps. All right. Yeah. If he can see it within a year, which Google Maps updates their satellite photos every year, you can go to Google Earth and look.
Not every location. Not
every location, yeah. But if this location.
Major cities, sure.
Yeah. So if you go back to that concrete is not going to dissipate for at least I don't know, what is it, 100 years or something, the life of concrete. So look at it in that sense. If he says he's certain it's still there, then, I mean, how could you just...
Then it would be something that you should be able to see from Google Earth. That is the point I'm trying to make, that if he's certain it's still there, it's something that he should be able to physically go on Google Earth, look at, and actually physically see the blaze, that it's still there.
That's the point I'm trying to make about
Unless it's just a geological feature that's not going to go anywhere.
Exactly, right? It's a known geographical feature. Like, I mean, a lot of people think the blaze is Battleship Rock and Jemez Mountains. And who's to say that's not true? But you could easily go on Google Earth, zoom down and go, oh, well, no shit. Battleship Rock is still there. We haven't had an earthquake. You know, Valdez Caldera hasn't blown up. It's still there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I get what you're saying, Iron. To me, what he's saying there, if he is certain it's still there and he has not been physically back to the spot, and we have to believe that he's telling us the truth, then it almost, in my interpretation, and my interpretation of his words is not confirmation of his intent, I interpret that as it cannot simply be a mark on a rock or a mark on a tree.
I agree 100%.
And I'm not saying you disagree with me on that, but it has to be something that he can visually see and that we should be able to visually see. It should be obvious, should be conspicuous, should be easily noticed, that we should be able to see it. We're just not recognizing it as the blaze, and neither are those 200-foot searchers.
I agree.
Maybe they would have found the treasure.
A mark on a tree, a mark on a rock, though, isn't the same as a mark on a tree. A mark on a rock is going to be there unless someone's going to move a 3,000-pound boulder. I mean,
okay, well then,
you
then
can
a mark on a rock, it would face one of the cardinal directions.
unless
it's facing up.
Yeah.
Well, unless it's facing up, sure, I will give you that. Absolutely, it is possible.
Maybe some of those spirals or whatever.
It could be a 500-foot spiral that's facing up. Absolutely,
Yeah.
Chris, you could be right. And it's
I'll tell you what,
to remove.
while you guys are talking about this, I'm going to find you a blaze in New Mexico, and I've given this to people, and I don't think they followed it up, but I'm going to give you a photo. I'm going to send it to you by mail, Sean, and you can post up, because I don't know how to post it on your meeting. And
It's going to take a while to get it up there.
Okay. Well,
Honestly, I would tell you right now, Iron, I don't like bringing up my email because there's a lot I have parsed a lot of stuff on there, and I don't like bringing up my email.
I'll tell you what, I'll describe it. I followed this solution, and anybody in the audience, I'll give you the solution. You can follow it. I want nothing from it. I do not believe it's in New Mexico, but it's something that it just stood out so weird. But anyway, I started it at, La Agua Fria Creek over near that Eagle Landing Lake. I'm not familiar with all the areas around New Mexico.
Eagle's Nest Lake.
Yeah. The Agua Fria starts up in the top of the mountain. It goes down in a canyon. That canyon goes straight down
called
to
Merino Valley.
It goes straight down to
and
Cleveland.
the Spanish word for merino is brown.
Brown.
It goes straight to Cleveland, New Mexico, home of the Cleveland Browns.
Well, you're thinking over there by Guyana, that's where Cleveland is.
Yeah. Well, there's Agua Fria Creek, northeast of Cleveland, New Mexico.
So not up near Eagle's Nest, nowhere near
Eagle's
Eagle's
down below
Nest.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then it breaks into a creek down there below Cleveland, off to the southeast, I believe it is. The creek is called, and I'm trying to do this off memory, La Herrera Alta Creek.
You're horrible with your Spanish.
La Herrera Alta Creek, which means the high iron mine creek, which is also heavy loads and water high.
Okay, but then Forrest has told us we don't need a Spanish to English translation.
I know, but this was before I heard that. So I followed the creek up, and it says, there'd be no paddle up your creek, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I followed the creek up on Google Maps, and sure enough, there's a big, huge white boulder that spans over the creek. You can see it on Google Maps. And on that boulder, what looks to be like an omega drawn on it from Google Maps.
Oh, now Decall's getting all excited. Look out.
I'm not kidding you. You can see it plain as day. I've told people at Finbury, because I said, I don't want to waste time going out and looking at it. You're welcome to go out there, because when I looked at the place, I just don't see anything special about it. It just looks like the creek is out in the edge of a field. to me, it's not important to me. And when I make that connection to the point, I'm always looking for what's special to Forrest, and I just don't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I would never go to New Mexico.
Well, again, we cannot force fit our interpretation of what's special to Forrest in this. That's I know you know that.
Yep.
You've been in this long enough. We just have to let the poem lead.
But I just thought it was strange that big boulder that is the size of a Volkswagen that you can see from Google Maps has the shape of an omega. It looks like somebody drew on this big boulder, but it looks like the shape of an omega on the rock.
So
I like it.
Okay, so let me just ask this question to you guys. I think, do most of you agree or disagree that the blaze is something small? What do you think, Crysty? Do you think it's small or large?
Like, give us a range, though.
I think it's more likely to be large.
Well, it's all subjective. I mean,
Wait
large
a minute.
and small.
Under 100 feet or under 1,000 feet, under 5 feet?
Sure.
Pick a number, though.
What do you think, Crysty? Large, size-wise, what do you think?
I don't think, like I've said at the beginning, I don't think we can know. I think that it's probably bigger rather than smaller. I don't think it's tiny. I mean, personally, I hope it's not. I mean, we'll see.
Like
probably bigger.
Tiny as in like a couple feet, and large as in larger than a couple 100 feet.
Probably 100 feet or less, unless it's a big meadow. But probably my goal, yeah, I'd say 100 feet. And
a meadow is a good blaze. I mean, that could be a big blaze. Sure. What, Iron?
I would say I'm still 100% certain he can see it from Google Earth. So I would say between 10 and 30 feet is the size of it.
So not a mark on a tree or
no, definitely
a mark
not.
On a rock, like Crysty makes a good point. It could be facing.
Definitely not. To me, it's got to be something that is 100% concrete, not abstract. And to me, I think a marking on a tree is abstract because they can be removed so easily by forest fire, by other humans. They can be manipulated by people.
And Mother Nature itself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Decall? Well, we know.
I like the logic, though, of 10 feet or bigger, because you could solve the poem online. Okay. And my gut would normally tell me, if it already didn't have the answer, was 100 feet. I like that. Maybe 200, since Forrest Fenn puts an emphasis on 200 all the time. All right, fine. Let's go between 10 and 200 feet.
Yeah. And my interpretation has really morphed over the last 4 years. It really morphed from something that I thought was relatively small, like a mark on a tree, a mark on a rock, or a very dazzling, brilliant display rock or something that I thought could be the blaze, to something that is overwhelming large, that is totally not feasible for us to even try to remove. So it's completely turned into something else. So with that said, where was I? I'm trying to look at my notes here. I wanted to move to. I want to move to. We all think that it's something rather large, at least here in the panel. I'm not sure exactly what the chat room is thinking and what their opinions are. And since none of us have the treasure, we don't know for certain whether it is something rather large or something small. We just don't know. And when we find the treasure, we'll be able to tell everybody, I guess. But I want to go to, and this is moving on to the fact that, do we actually have to find the blaze in order to find the treasure? And this is the one thing I know I'll probably get, burned at the stake for even bringing up. But I'm gonna share my screen really quick for everybody. Let's see if I can bring this up. And this goes to a video. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay. So this is the Collected Works Too Far to Walk book signing event that there's an audio. I think this was, you can see here, was from Toby and Shelley from A Gypsy's Kiss. We've got Douglas Preston on the left, and on Forrest Fenn's left, we've got Michael McGarity, some close friends of his. And this is just a short clip. This is at the 34-minute and 40-minute mark, or 34-minute and 40-second mark. And hopefully you guys can hear this. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
I can't hear it.
Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
It's quiet.
Is it? Okay.
Really quiet.
Well, basically what Forrest Fenn says in this video and you guys can go watch this for yourself. And this is at the 34-minute and 40-second mark, and you can go back and watch this. Forrest Fenn says, if someone was able to read the poem over and over and was able to decipher the first few clues, they could find the treasure. It may not be easy, but it's definitely not impossible. So what I get from that, let me escape out of this and stop sharing my screen here. Okay, I should have it back. What I get from that is how many of you, now I'm a 9 clues, 9 sentences guy, okay? And I can't prove that's right or wrong, but how many of you in the panel tonight or even in the chat room believe that the blaze falls within the first few clues? Crysty?
I don't think so.
Iron?
No, it's just my personal opinion. It's, let's see, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, home around 5, 6. It's either clue 6 or clue 7. I don't know which one yet.
Decall?
6 or clue 7.
Isn't the word blaze in the 5th line of the 5th sentence of the poem?
It's in the 4th stanza.
4th stanza, 5th sentence. Okay. It's the 5th sentence, but probably the 4th clue, since we begin at where warm waters halt, right? Are you and I thinking?
If you're going with the 9 sentences on the 9 clues, sure.
Okay, but even the first stanza is a complete sentence, but not the first clue.
Not the first clue, yes. And Forrest Fenn says if you're able to decipher the first few clues, you can. So
the blaze is in the 5th sentence and in the 4th stanza, and also the 4th clue.
Or 4th sentence, or the 4th sentence if you go by the
4th clue.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm being articulate here. I don't know. I mean, until somebody gives me a better idea for the 9 clues than the 9 sentences, I don't think I'll ever change my mind. What's the point? It's every line of the poem is critical to me. I like to think in terms of 24 lines, and I'm fascinated by this first stanza not being the first clue. Okay, how in the heck can it not be the first clue? Does that mean it's the 9th clue? The hell is?
Could be the last clue, and the tense nature of it could be the last thing. But I think the point we're trying to get across here, and I think Will, in his interpretation, I'm not asking for his interpretation of what he believes the 9 clues are, but in his interpretation, Will, you don't believe that the blaze falls within those first few clues, correct?
No, not at all. My interpretation is the path begins.
I'm not asking for your interpretation of what the clues are, but if you want to give those, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, I won't do the whole thing, but my interpretation is the first few clues, which we're assuming is 1 through 4. If I go 1 through 4, I'm assuming that it's where warm waters halts, take us in the canyon down, not too far, but too far to walk, put in below the home of Brown. I think the home of Brown is clue number 4. Okay.
So the blaze doesn't fall within those first few clues for you?
No, not for me, no.
And then Crysty, your interpretation.
Well, so I think that it's difficult to say that with the idea that the poem is a treasure map.
Sure.
I mean, unless the blaze is the place you're at. If what you're saying is like, it's basically one big place. If that's a possibility, but the clues would still have to take you to a more specific location. But with the idea that every single clue is a place on a treasure map, I don't see how the blaze could be in the first, few clues, unless it's a really big blaze.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anything's possible, but I tend to think that it's more of a map.
Yeah.
Aren't you bringing this up, Sean? Because he said someone may have figured out the 4th, the 4 clues.
Yes.
Isn't that the whole?
But he's not certain. If it's the 4th clue, and if the blaze is the 4th clue, and somebody may have figured that out, then someone may be at the blaze and hasn't figured out how to look quickly. Well, when he said he's not certain to call, he said, people have arrived at 200 feet. Some may have figured out the first 4 clues, but I'm not certain.
Right.
I'm just
I agree.
I'm just thinking that if he doesn't think they're certain, it's because they're not certain what the blaze is.
It's easy to consider that option because who the hell cares? We all know that nobody has the treasure. So let's consider the other side. Maybe somebody has it. So if somebody has seen or mentioned the blaze to Fenn, Okay. And somebody may have figured out the first 4 clues, and the blaze is likely the 4th clue. Okay. Then we can, and then what was the thing about Lucky Love's video? Did that determine the blaze was in photo or just
No.
the treasure's location?
He just said somebody had sent him a photo of where they were, and that's how he knows people have been.
They were in 200 feet.
Yeah.
So if the blaze is smaller than 200 feet, maybe they haven't arrived at the blaze yet, even though they're within 200 feet and took a picture within 200 feet. It's a little. I mean, that gives more credibility that the blaze is about 200 or 100 feet. So I can't imagine that he's not also including the blaze in that idea of the photo being shown to him and the blaze being there and kind of obvious.
Obvious, exactly.
Sean, what you were mentioning, and I know we've gone back to this a few times. You said that I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to get it word for word. You said that where Forrest mentioned some people may have solved the first 4 clues, but he's not certain. That wasn't the latest update he gave. Okay. The latest update he gave was when somebody asked him if they had solved all the clues. And it was a live.
Nobody had given the right order.
It said no one had given him the clues and then he reiterated it in the right order. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people wanted to reinterpret that as saying, well, he didn't say all the clues. He just said no one has given him the clues. But to me, for somebody that old, I think he was answering the question about all the clues. Maybe somebody, and I know this goes into the hypothetical lead searcher, but maybe that lead searcher knows all the clues, but just hasn't told him each one of the clues in order. In other words, they mention one of the clues. Say, oh my God, I can't believe this was the clue in an email, but it's out of order to what they've told him.
Well, they're within 200 feet. So of course there's a disappointment involved because this damn chump, this poor Chumley over here, within 200 feet on multiple occasions likely, and doesn't have the box. Okay. So it's either very well concealed or the guy didn't search thoroughly or maybe there's some effort on the ground, or maybe it's not that easy to figure out the rest of the steps.
Or maybe it's just in a place that a lot of people are going to and nobody's figuring out the clues.
I find it hard to
search
believe.
area.
Like Crysty said, it could be not saying it is, but it could be a public spot, and the 200 feet is a measurement to where the treasure is at that public spot. And he's talking to Mindy in that one statement that nobody's looking at the right spot. So maybe everybody's there within 200 feet and they're not looking at the area where the treasure is.
Yeah.
Well, I think he said a lot of people had been
near
within
the right
500
spot,
feet.
not at the right spot.
Right.
Yeah.
What, Crysty?
Well, and go ahead, Crysty. What'd you say?
I said, didn't he say a lot of people had been within 500 feet and then he knows of a few that had been within 200? So, I mean, 500 feet, like that means within 500 feet, it's a well-trafficked area.
Yeah, imagine finding an arrowhead. Sorry, Sean. Finding an arrowhead within 500-foot radius. We're looking for a little glimmer of bronze, maybe completely covered by bark or grass. Tall grass this time of year is ferocious. The other parts of the year, water and other mud possibly in other parts of the year. Holy crap. I mean, finding an arrowhead or this little glimmer or this little concept of something different, a little flag, some idea that man has been there and left a treasure chest, or something spiritual, symbolic, or meaningful. That's I don't think anyone's going to stumble on it because it's well concealed.
Hey, Sean.
Yep.
I'm going to paste it in the chat below, and you can just click the link. Here's that blaze in New Mexico I was talking about.
Okay. Well, here's what I want to circle back to, guys. And this is the whole point of, do we actually need to find the blaze, or must we find the blaze in order to find the treasure? And Iron, that may be blocking it out. Sometimes it won't allow links it's done it to me too. And I'm the moderator of this damn channel. So
all you got to do is copy and paste it. That's all you got to do.
Well, sometimes it doesn't even come in there. Like I'm not even seeing it yet.
Oh, really?
Okay. Here's what I'm trying to get back to. If Forrest Fenn has said, if somebody could solve, or decipher the first few clues in the treasure or in the poem, they could find the treasure. It may not be easy, but it's definitely not impossible. And I find that actually laughable because the whole poem is not easy. It's not impossible to solve, because he thinks somebody can solve it, but it's definitely not easy. But if he's saying if one could solve the first few clues, and we know the first clue is begin at where warm waters halt. If you are a person that believes that the clues are individual lines in the poem, like begin at where warm waters halt, a clue, take it in the canyon down, a second clue, not far but too far to walk, may or may not be a clue of yours. Let's say you think it is, that's 3, but let's say you don't, and then you think your third clue is put in below the home of Brown. The blaze does not fall within those. Even one like myself, the quote unquote evil poem purist who believes that the 9 sentences are the 9 clues, would not even believe that the blaze falls within that, because my first few clues would be begin at where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, not far but too far to walk, 1 clue. Put in below the home of Brown, 2 clues. From there, it's no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh. There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. Those would be my 3 clues. The blaze doesn't even fall within those. But Forrest Fenn is telling us, and this is a very early interview. This is 6 years ago. The man was 82 years old or 83, when he said this. His faculties, no offense, Forrest, were probably a little bit better than they are 6 years as they are now. He's still sharp as a tack. I met him at Femboree. Iron can attest to that. Crysty can attest that he's still sharp as a whip, but he's not as sharp as he was 6 years ago when this thing was fresh in his mind. He was telling us 6 years ago that if one could figure out the first few clues, they could find the treasure. The blaze does not fall within that. And if you believe that the blaze marks the treasure's location, and Forrest Fenn is telling us theoretically we may not need to find it or find the blaze to find the treasure, then what is the purpose of the blaze? Does it mark the treasure or does it do something else? And I think that's the big question that we have to ask ourselves. If you're going along your path from where you believe the poem starts or gives you a starting point, and you're going, from clue 1 to clue 2 to clue 3, not yet figured out what the blaze is, and you could find the treasure without finding the blaze, where does that put you? What is the blaze supposed to do? Is it supposed to mark the treasure or something else? And I'm just throwing this out there, Will. What do you think the blaze could do if it doesn't mark the treasure? What do you think?
Well, I go back because I take a certain, not offense, but I take action to what you're saying about the first few clues that you can find the treasure or you could find the treasure. Forrest is not stating you will find the treasure. I think too many people are trying to assume that the word could means they will find it.
But we've got the architect telling us that we could.
He's the man that
put this whole thing together. Yeah, it's a hypothetical question. Absolutely.
All could describes is that it's possible. If you can find the first few clues, then it's possible for you to find the treasure. Which means if you can find the first few clues, then you're on the path that leads.
Well, if you can figure out the first 2 clues, you're halfway to the treasure, hypothetically speaking, right?
Isn't that what he said?
Yes.
If you can solve the first 2 clues. Now, the reason, because I believe the path to be no longer, and in his personal preference, I believe the path, which is the clues 1 through 9, to be no longer than about 1,000 feet.
Okay.
I think the first 2 clues will put you halfway there.
Sure.
And that's the only I can't do it anymore because we're flying out in 2 days to Montana to check that spot. And if the chase is over this weekend, then you have a high probability of who found it. So
mine's 43 miles from begin at where to quest to cease. So everybody has different ideas.
Crysty, what do you think? If it's not to mark the treasure and we don't need to find the blaze to find the treasure, then what could the blaze do for us?
I mean, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that because it says, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down. So what are we looking down for? I mean, that's my thought. And it's possible. I mean, think about it. If you were in within 200 to 500 feet, even in a square mile, if you spend enough time looking for that treasure with no blaze, you may find it. If you kick over enough trees or take a metal detector, whatever, eventually you will find the treasure if you are in the right area.
If you were confident about that.
I mean, I think that the blaze is just showing you where it's at, and I have a really hard time wrapping my head around any other theories. I mean, I'm open to it, but I have no idea what it would be.
Well, let's fine tune this a little bit. If Forrest Fenn has said, in the question where somebody asked him which direction does the blaze face,
right?
And I'm completely paraphrasing this here off of memory. Forrest Fenn had said, Casey, I don't believe or whoever, I don't believe or I didn't take a radial off of the blaze. I don't believe it faces in any of those directions, right? So if the blaze doesn't face in any direction, is it not possible to think that maybe it is us searchers that need to face a certain direction in order to view the blaze?
Yeah, I mean, the gold bug, I mean, doesn't that fit the idea of spying across a certain direction and standing in a specific spot and spying across there and seeing
Why do you got to go down my biggest rabbit hole, Decall?
You're the one that says you like that story.
Oh, I love that story. I love that, but but doesn't mean anything. I mean, but I mean that's the question. I mean, if the blaze doesn't face in any particular direction, and again, a lot of people, this is completely open to interpretation. Iron, you said this. People think it may not face in that cardinal direction. It could face southwest, northeast.
Well, to go against that,
or up, right?
And this is just how Forrest thinks. He's already stated publicly as a fact he believes a northerly direction is 271 degrees to 89 degrees.
Yep.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to argue that it's northwest or southwest, I mean,
well, you've got MEH Michael Hugh that is telling you that right now, Mr. PhD. No offense, Mike, but you're saying the blaze could face even 1 degree off, say north, and Forrest could say it would still be correct. And he's got a point, but you've got a good counterpoint, Iron, to saying Forrest Fenn has said his north is 171 degrees to 89 degrees.
Said as far as he's concerned, and this was during a video, I believe he was being asked about how north is north when you're going from Santa Fe into the mountains. And he's like, as far as he's concerned, the northerly direction, and I think he used northerly, a northerly direction is from 271 to 89 degrees. So if you're going to go by what Forrest says, then you have to trust everything he says within reason.
Well, we can't trust anything he says because everything's left to interpretation.
I mean,
Crysty?
for me,
Crysty.
so just going back to it doesn't face a certain direction. I mean, going back to this story, the hypothetical story that you're, I don't know all these specific locations, but you're hiking behind Fairy Falls in Yellowstone, and you're on the trail, and all of a sudden, you go up the mountain, and now you're overlooking Morning Glory Pool or whatever pool, and you see this enormous blaze that is not facing any direction, but it's a blaze, and it's technically not, and it's a blaze that everyone goes to, but you have to be in a specific spot, because the minute you go over that mountain, you see a blaze and you look down and there's a treasure. And that's just a hypothetical, like, does the blaze matter in that, situation? And, and maybe a better question would be, maybe you could give me an example of what you're talking about of a blaze that doesn't matter. Like, do you know what I mean?
To me,
Sean, specifically, like this hypothetical question you're posing of like, well, what if the blaze doesn't matter, or what?
Yeah, I know what she's saying.
Well, I mean, again, let's say you've crossed a place that is no place for the meek. Okay. And your end is ever drawing nigh. You're going up a creek that you cannot paddle up, and the only thing that's up there is heavy lows and water high, right? You're going up there. At what point in time do you stop? Do you stop at water high? Do you think that's where you stop? What is the blaze supposed to do? Is that a directional clue? If I'm sending you on a direction, I'm sending you a certain place, at some point in time, I need you to stop, and I need to turn you in a specific direction. What if the blaze is nothing more than a clue that gets you turned in the opposite direction, that faces you in the correct direction? If that blaze is supposed to be something that is conspicuous, that is obvious, easy to see, then he's trying to get you, in my opinion, in my interpretation, it's not confirmation of his intent, but he may be trying to get you facing in a correct direction from which to then look quickly down.
Mhm.
Now, whether you think that is the waterfall or whatever else, we don't know. Again, people are arriving within 200 to 500 feet of this and are not finding the blaze, and maybe they are, because some people may have solved the first 4 clues, but he's not certain because they haven't clearly identified what the blaze is. What if the blaze is nothing more than a clue to get you facing in the right direction from which to look quickly down from? And that's all I'm posing out here. If it's not to mark the treasure, what else could it do? And I'm not saying that my interpretation is the correct one. I'm just looking at the flip side of this, that it could be something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be asking, how much is, I mean, is this spot this big? There's only a little baby window, like 1 degree of the compass, or is it 360-degree view of the sun? You know, is it something all encompassing, or just a narrow window of opportunity to actually see the blaze or comprehend the blaze?
But we have to ask ourselves, okay, Decall, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what if we can figure it out with just the first few clues, like Forrest Fenn has said, it's not going to be easy, but definitely not impossible, then what the heck do the other 6 clues do for us?
Well,
We've got 6 remaining clues. What do they do for us? Do they help focus us and narrow? Is it directional? We're going up this way, keep going, and people have walked right on past the other 7 clues, right? Because they're not understanding the clues and maybe not turning themselves around, not understanding what the rest of the clues are trying to tell them to do. You got to keep narrowing down. It's like a target. I think people have talked about this. You got to find where warm water salt, then you got to find the canyon down, then you got to find this, you got to find this. I mean, he's trying to narrow. And how do you do that? Kentucky windage, right? His sights on his BB gun weren't right. He had to aim it a little bit different. He's Kentucky windaging you into the right, potentially into the right zone to look.
I'll try to jump into kind of.
Oh, try it. Decall's not going to let you.
Well, I'm going to try to steer away from your proposal that you need that you're facing a certain direction, that he's trying to get you to face a certain direction. Because like I said, everything I do is logic, and I keep going back to everything Forrest says. Forrest has said, in so many words, paraphrase, that you can solve it from home in theory. Yeah. So why do you need to be boots on the ground to find the blaze? Why do you need to be facing a certain direction by walking to it? You should be able to see the blaze from the map. So there should be only one direction, south. Look quickly down. There should only be one direction.
But that's your interpretation of what down is.
But I'm going off of what Forrest says. That's the only interpretation I'm going off of, what Forrest said.
Yeah, but down could be down could be south, down could be, I don't know, something else.
And if you're, let's say, if you're looking up at the blaze, I mean, if you look at that video of Dal Neitzel and Cynthia in Yellowstone, the CBS Dateline interview with Deadly Treasure, whatever, you know, Cynthia sees this large rock formation and she says, that could be the blaze. And I'm not saying that that's Dale Neitzel's and Cynthia's blaze, but then the guy asked her, well, what should we do? She's all, well, you got to get your butt over there and look quickly down. You know, I mean, yeah.
And another example is Forrest, and I'm paraphrasing this, I'll probably butcher it up because this came so many years ago, but he said, I said that the path would not be direct for the person who doesn't know.
Yes.
Hasn't solved it beforehand, but sure for the one who has. And he stated,
I warned that the path would not be direct for those who had no certainty of the location beforehand, but sure for the one who did.
So if you haven't been there beforehand, if you haven't been there and you have solved it, then the only way you can do that, the location, is to see it on Google Maps. The blaze has to be looking down. And Crysty made a good point, which this is one of the things I solved a long time ago, but it could easily be a flat object. The blaze could be a flat rock.
Absolutely.
With a marker on it. I just don't think you're going to be I don't think you have to face a certain direction.
But if you're standing on top of Christy's blaze, no offense, Crysty, I'm not saying this is your blaze, but if it is a blaze that faces directly up and you're standing on top of it, where do you look quickly down? If it's a
Well, it's
100-foot
south.
blaze
It's south or under the rock.
if it's a 800-foot salamander, no offense to call, where do you look? Where do you look down from? Where are you looking down? Are you looking at the tail? Are you looking at the head? You're looking at the middle of it? I mean,
At the smile, of course.
Of course, the smile. Of course, every salamander has a smile.
I just feel it's either down as in beneath the blaze if it's a flat object, or it's in a southerly direction.
Okay, let's just hypothetically say here, and I want to get your opinion. Let's say that the blaze is a large hoodoo, like a monolith, like the Washington Monument, and it's standing straight up.
Yep.
That does not face any particular direction.
Yeah,
it would be completely subjective for you to say, well, it faces south. Well, of course, part of it, half of it, quarter of it does. And somebody else would say, well, it faces west. A quarter of it does. You know, it faces up. Crysty would be right. It does face up. It may not face in any of those directions. But if a hoodoo that is a large object that's standing out of the ground, it doesn't have a face. It's completely subjective, just like not far but too far to walk. That is completely subjective for each one of us. Crysty could probably outwalk any one of us in a distance match, right? But that distance for her is completely different than what it could be for Decall, Iron, or myself, right? So that blaze, that hoodoo standing up, doesn't necessarily face in any direction. So is it not us searchers that may have to theoretically face the blaze? You know, it should be us that needs to face the blaze in a certain direction in order to then know which direction we need to look quickly down.
Well, see, I mean, I hate to keep going back to the same logic, but there you keep going back to boots on the ground.
Your logic or my logic? Who's a logical person here? None of us are.
I'm going off the exact words of Forrest. I'm not trying to say I need to be boots on the ground. I'm going off what Forrest has said. You can solve it in theory from home. So
sure,
if you
theory,
can do that,
but not likely in practice.
Boots on the ground to see the blaze.
I would like to think that Forrest Fenn has a lot of pride in his poem. There's something very interesting in this connection or relationship between Warm Waters Halt and the blaze. I think there's a running theme here from beginning to end, okay? And I think that he's pounding that into our heads. You got to know where Warm Waters Halt. You got to know where Warm Waters Halt. Finding the blaze on its own is not going to work out. Blah, blah, blah. I think there is the riddle. This is the heart of the riddle, and that's why Forrest Fenn is expressing some sort of frustration with us not finding Warm Waters Halt and not being able to understand the blaze, because there's a theme involved. Okay, so whatever the hell that theme is, it's meant to be understood, probably some thematic, symbolic, spiritual meaning behind it, or or some grammar issues pointing to it.
Okay.
I think there's something to be studied there at the very least.
I think that I think the big problem, in my opinion, of the 500-foot searchers is, or has been, that we're wrapped around the fact that the blaze must be some very small mark or particular place that marks the location of the treasure. And I think that this, in my opinion, ties into the whole point of my reiterating, a 2014 question to Forrest, where Forrest Fenn said, anyone that would get within 12 feet of the treasure would be highly unlikely not to find it. And then I re-asked that question to Forrest and said, Forrest, after 4 more years, do you care to update this question? And he basically said, better not answer that question. So, what does that tell us? Does it tell us that, the blaze has been removed? Does it tell us that the treasure's been covered up? What does that really tell us? Does it tell us that the blaze really isn't a marker that marks the location and people have walked right past the treasure and didn't see it because Mother Nature has covered it up? Those are the thought processes I'm going through. I could be 500 miles off from where the treasure is in the area that I'm searching. A lot of people would probably go, yeah, Sean, you are. But I don't know. I mean, I tend to think that his non-answer to that is the fact that he believes somebody has been within that close and hasn't found it, which leads me to believe that the blaze may not be some marker that marks the physical location of the treasure. I thought that for many years. I really did. Since I really started this thing, and I'm wavering on that completely.
Yeah.
Any last words on that?
I was looking in the chat. I think Troy and Aaron are having a disagreement on a quote. I think it has something to do with the you have to be boots on ground to solve the last clue. With what Troy's trying to say, and I believe it's Forrest's quote that you have to be present to complete the solve.
Physically present to complete the solve.
Yeah,
yes,
so
that was from 2017 6 questions.
And the blind man reference, that's pretty interesting too.
So I would have to agree. I'm not sure what Troy, if you could repost what he said. I'm not sure what he said that you were saying was wrong. I can't scroll up and get it. I'm trying to keep track of the chat.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. Trust me, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is really.
Crysty,
hard.
what do you have to add to this before we wrap this up? We're coming up on 2 hours here.
Unfortunately, I don't really have anything to add on exactly what you said. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we have to, if you've been wise and found the blaze, you look quickly down, Terry Scant with Marvel gaze, you know, like I think that we have to be looking at something and the blaze is showing us what we're looking at. And, you know, why aren't people, or what?
Go ahead. Sorry.
It should be obvious, is what he said. The distance to the treasure should be obvious.
You know, and I keep going back to why haven't people found it? I don't think it's a Mother Nature thing. I'm kind of getting to the point, honestly, and you guys will probably hate me for this, but I mean, what are we all missing? Is it like, you know, I'm starting to look at like anagrams in the poem, and is the poem like, we're all missing it. You can't tell me that like 300,000 people have been boots on the ground. And, you know, I think that we have thoroughly searched, you know, most areas. So there's something that we're missing. I don't think that we're just not seeing it. I don't think it's any of those things. I think there's something, you know, and he said that. He says, you know, there's only a few searchers that are focusing tight on a word that is key.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Don't go all the way
what
down.
The heck? You know, I mean, and that's just my closing thoughts, is that nobody flipping knows. And that we've got to be missing something, you know.
I love
because
that. You tied that in. Nobody flipping knows. This is the flip side. You're
flip
right.
inside, yeah.
I think the blaze, you know, maybe the blaze is something in the poem we're supposed to be, you know, maybe it's all tied together, but.
It's the blind guy. Let's go back to the blind guy, because how could he see it? How could he not? I mean, it's something visual. Otherwise, Forrest Fenn would be able to identify it as a non-blind person, or as a blind person, he could go to it. But I'm sorry, I'm confusing it. But the blind guy can't find it. The blind guy cannot find it. So it's something visual from boots on the ground. So that's only like a 50-foot radius that a normal person can see in the woods.
Crysty actually mentioned when she was talking about, gosh, I got it on Decall, what Decall was saying, and I forgot what was the last thing you said before Decall jumped in there.
Sorry.
Who, me?
Oh,
yeah.
A word that is key.
A word that is key. I'm just saying there's something in the poem like that we're not.
Oh, okay, I got it. You said that you felt that maybe the blaze is described in the poem. You know, Forrest actually was asked that question. Is the blaze something that you can only find boots on the ground, or can it be predetermined within the poem? And Forrest wouldn't answer that.
Right.
Yep. Hey, you see, he said something to the fact, you know, I thought about your question for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's been 30 minutes now, and I'm going to decline to answer it. And that's completely paraphrased. But I think that's almost like, you know, only time will tell. You know, if it's a marvel gaze, what are we doing? We're marveling at it. We're gazing upon it. We're just sitting back in wonder, and we're taking time to appreciate it. I mean, there's different ways you can take that. And guys, we're getting up on 2 hours, and I want to wrap this up. I know DeCall's got late. He's got to go pick up Mama Sita tonight. We do have an encore coming up. But really the whole purpose of tonight's discussion, guys, was just to have a good time, talk about it, you know, 4 different treasure hunters talking about, you know, not just what we believe the blaze is, because I think we've all hashed that out to death. We beat that horse. It's to talk about it in a different way. And I'd love to see this continue on the forums, and maybe have other, you know, discussions about it and videos and stuff, but to discuss, okay, if it's not simply to mark the treasure's location, and I don't think any 4 of us people here are saying that that's not potentially what the case is, or what the purpose of the blaze is. But if that is not the purpose of the blaze, what could its purpose be? Is it to get us facing a different direction? Is it theoretically to mark the treasure's location, or completely something else? That's the debate that we want to continue to talk about, beyond this. In the comments section below, we'd love to hear what you guys think and go on about this. I will definitely go back through the chat room tonight or tomorrow or throughout the next few days and go back through here and answer some of your guys' questions, because Iron did a good job of capturing some of those things and bringing them up, but I have not done a good job of keeping track of the chat room. I've really been paying attention to my panel members here, trying to listen to what they have to say in their feedback. And I think that's what's important. Any last words from you guys really quick before we wrap this thing up?
I wouldn't feel too bad about the audience. As from the past streams you've had, I didn't see as many questions directed towards us. So it wasn't that bad.
Well, they usually ignore us and they just talk amongst themselves, which is great. I love being in the chat rooms and other people's chats because I can talk with people that are my friends and have fun. And I appreciate those that give us the opportunity to do that. Christy, you got anything? No,
just thanks for inviting me. I really love just talking about, I love having friends to talk about the treasure with. Friends, I don't know. I'm not new to the
You're not new.
Search, but I'm new. It's my introduction into the community. But
sure.
Hey, I appreciate being here. So
we love having you on here. You brought out some good points. You brought out some really good points tonight. And
Christy, I understand it completely. I'm Southwest Virginia here. I am the only Forrest Fenn searcher in Southwest Virginia. Everybody else rolls their eyes and laughs at me. It's so refreshing to get to talk to other people about it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Decall, anything?
Yeah, we are a crazy bunch, and be careful how much money you spend and how much marriages you wreck. Be careful.
Yeah. Well, I've met Ben, her husband. He's a great guy. He was at Femboree. I got to sit down and talk with both Christy and Ben. A lot of people don't know Christy's daughter. Can I say her name?
Yeah.
Glory, right? Is that her name?
Glory,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, Glory and my daughter Bradley became like BFFs at Femboree, nice. And they just had a blast. I don't know when did they come up with the idea to completely dress alike? Like
I don't know.
They did that on their own, didn't they?
Wow. Yeah, Glory's full of those kind of ideas. So
yeah, but they had a blast, and my wife was really concerned about the kids having a good time and her being left out or whatever else. But she was pleasantly surprised and had a blast, and she was really happy that the kids had a good time. And that's a lot of props to Sasha, Cynthia, and Jay Diggins who put this whole event together. And I know I'm missing a lot of people that put a lot of effort in this, but they did an awesome job. But it was awesome to see our kids playing around with each other and having a good time. So,
and even on A Gypsy's Kiss, Toby was saying, there was a lot of kids there and they all seemed to find their own friends and they had a good time and they weren't like screaming and throwing, but I was like, yes.
That's cool. Yeah, I love it.
It was awesome. So anyways, guys, we've had a fun night tonight. I always like to ask at the end of the video, if you've enjoyed this video and you like it, we'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you don't, that's okay. If you don't like me, you don't like Iron, you don't like Christy or Decall, you can give it a thumbs down. You're not going to hurt our feelings.
Don't be rude.
We're just whatever. We're just having fun amongst each other. We're just four searchers, just like every one of you guys in the chat room. We're just talking about whatever. None of us are authorities on the chase. We're just having a good time. And we appreciate you guys coming out and enjoying the show with us. And we hope you like it. Give it a like if not. If you do or whatever. And we will catch you all on the flip side. Good night, guys.
Good night.